Welcome to the Eye Opener. I'm your host, Michael Lewis. A coalition of 10 states is backing Florida's ban on big tech censorship. We know California has a serious wildfire issue, but are the fires really that wild? Governor Gavin Newsom blames climate change. He also made statewide vote by mail permanent. He told Californians the move is to protect election integrity and transparency. Segregated housing programs are getting popular in universities. Western Washington University is the new follower. But we wonder how segregated housing is going to help promote inclusiveness and combat racism in the country. Okay, my friends, let's take a closer look together. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is leading a coalition of 10 states to support Florida's ban on big tech censorship. Governor Ron DeSantis signed a new law in May that allows Floridians to sue big tech if it censors users without a consistent standard across the board. The law also prevents tech companies from banning Florida's political candidates. Social media companies that deplatform candidates for statewide office will be fined $250,000 and $25,000 per day for candidates in lower-level offices. However, a district judge in June blocked the law after 2 internet trade groups filed a lawsuit. The interesting part is, the 2 trade companies argued the law may be a violation of the First Amendment, that it compels internet companies to host offensive speech they otherwise wouldn't. They think censoring speech in this case protects First Amendment rights of free speech, and the court agreed. Now, the coalition, in an amicus brief, said the district court's analysis regarding the First Amendment is riddled with errors. The brief said the court claimed that the Florida law regulates speech when in fact it regulates the conduct that is unprotected by the First Amendment, their arbitrary application of social media's content moderation policies. Paxton said the regulation of big tech censorship will inevitably suppress the ideas and beliefs of millions of Americans. He'll defend the First Amendment and ensure conservative voices have the right to be heard. Earlier this month, Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed a similar bill into law. The new Texas law prevents social media companies with more than 50 million monthly users, in other words, big tech, from canceling people for their political beliefs. Why has California been having so many wildfires in recent years? If you look at the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection's top 10 largest fires, 8 of them happened after 2017. The largest one was in 2020 and the second largest in 2021. In a July article, the New York Times said the biggest cause of California's out-of-control wildfires is climate change. It cited bioclimatologist Park Williams at Columbia University, who asserted that fuel drying, driven by global warming, is the clearest link between climate change and increased wildfire activity in the state. This scientist said, quote, "Warmer temperatures dry out fuels. In areas with abundant and very dry fuels, all you need is a spark." We don't know if the weather is really getting any warmer, but definitely there are more people setting sparks. In the past week, California caught at least 2 arson suspects. One of them is a 20-year-old woman named Alexandra Suverneva. She was accused of sparking the Fawn Fire, which destroyed 41 homes and 90 structures, and over 2,000 more people are under threat. The police are now checking out Alexandra for possibly starting other fires. A Cal Fire officer said there's a high possibility that she's responsible for a fire from the previous evening too. As the Fawn Fire raged last Wednesday, Alexandra made some bizarre claims. She said she'd been hiking and tried to get to Canada, which seemed pretty far away from California. She also told forest officials that she was thirsty, and when she came across a puddle of alleged bear urine, she tried to make a fire to boil the urine in order to drink it. Alexandra ended up setting a fire and eventually got trapped in the brush. Local reports said she had to call the fire department to come help her. In another incident, Border Patrol agents apprehended an illegal migrant suspected of starting fires in the Jacumba wilderness of California. When agents responded to a fire on Saturday afternoon, they located an 18-year-old Mexican male in the vicinity. The teen was caught in the middle of attempting to start another fire. Agents had tried to put out the second fire, but had little success. From January to April this year, Cal Fire said it had arrested 44 people suspected of arson. At this rate, 2021 is on track to have another 120 arsons arrested following the previous year, a stunning increase of 70% from 2016 to 2019. Instead of blaming climate change, don't you think the wildfire crisis is more of a man-made disaster? When numbers and data tell you there are more people purposefully setting fires in California, why would you still blame the weather? However, the rampant devastating wildfires go along with climate activist global warming narrative. California Governor Gavin Newsom last week signed a climate package worth $15 billion. The package includes $4 billion for urban greening projects, $4 billion to fast-track the goal of zero-emissions vehicles, $5 billion for drought response, and $1 billion for wildfire prevention. Gavin Newsom made another big move. He signed a law on Monday that makes vote by mail permanent in California. It's not just about making it permanent. All voters are now being forced to receive a mail-in ballot for a state election. The law requires the state to send ballots with prepaid return envelopes to all voters statewide in local elections. Newsom explained the act is a counter move against voter suppression, such as asking people for IDs to vote. Newsom said mail-in voting bolsters election integrity and transparency. He's just enhancing people's rights to vote. The danger of universal mail-in voting is not all registered voters actually vote in an election. A significant portion don't vote. In these cases, someone else could vote for them. Their ballots will be shown as returned in the system, and it'll be hard to tell. Even if you voted either in person or by mail, someone else could still vote for you beforehand. Remember the 70% already voted story in Newsom's recall election? That could happen on a much larger scale without accountability. Democrat-controlled election offices wouldn't address it. Just look at how they dealt with it in the recall election. They had no explanation for why the system said someone had already voted, and no one knows whether the impacted votes ever got corrected in the system. It looks like Newsom may have benefited from the mass application of mail-in voting already, thanks to the pandemic. It would be otherwise impossible because traditionally, vote by mail is designed for citizens who live overseas or who are physically absent during an election. A 2005 report from former Secretary of State James Baker warned that absentee ballots remain the largest source of illegitimate voting in the United States. The report noted the practice is vulnerable in several ways. It said the citizens who vote at home, at nursing homes, at workplace, or in church are more susceptible to pressure or to intimidation to vote. But Democrats like Gavin Newsom dare to say that mail-in voting protects election integrity and transparency. The left is getting extremely comfortable for saying the exact opposite. They crack down on common sense election security measures such as voter ID laws, calling it voter suppression, and touted illegal votes or having illegals to vote as democracy. We really aren't optimistic about the direction California is heading in. We hope more Californians would at least be able to tell the lies from some of their government officials. The Marine officer who resigned and was criticized by the military's leadership for demanding accountability amid the chaotic Afghanistan withdrawal, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller, is currently in jail awaiting his pretrial hearing. Scheller first sparked attention by posting a video on Facebook blasting military leaders for the embarrassing U.S. withdrawal. He posed some serious questions regarding their command decisions on events leading up to and during the final evacuation effort. Scheller released more videos on social media afterward and gathered both praise from people as well as ire from military leadership. He was then given a gag order by superiors, but he ignored it. He sensed his words could eventually result in a trip to prison. He said in his last post, "I'm ready for jail." Scheller's father defended his son's actions. He said, "All our son did is ask the questions that everybody was asking themselves, but they were too scared to speak out loud. He was asking for accountability. In fact, I think he even asked for an apology that we made mistakes, but they couldn't do that." An official statement from the military says the time, date, and location of Scheller's proceedings have not been determined, but he will be afforded all due process. And coming up, a Washington University created segregated housing for black students, calling it inclusive. And Biden's socialist agenda is expected to kill 5.3 million jobs. But before we continue, I want to take a quick second to ask all my friends watching and my live chat family to please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already, but most importantly, share this video. Depending on you, my friends, and the power of word of mouth to spread the truth. Also, to support the Eye Opener team, please consider donating to the show or purchasing a mug that matters. You can find the link in the description below. Your support, as always, is greatly appreciated. Salute. A university in Washington created segregated housing specifically for black students. Western Washington University designated the fourth floor of Elma Clark Glass Hall as housing reserved for its Black Affinity Housing Program. On its website, the university states, the program will explore and celebrate the diversity of Black and African American people and culture with historical and contemporary contexts. By diversity, Western Washington decided to design a living space exclusively for Black students. The school also touted the housing program would help foster a warm and vibrant community supporting social, personal, and academic success. Now, how would segregating living space achieve this for Black students? If their identity is said to be, quote, marginalized, as the school believes. Common sense and traditional values tell us we should not emphasize people's race and ethnicity, but focus on merit and common ground. But society is constantly reminding you of the opposite. Western Washington is not alone. Other prominent universities have adopted similar segregating housing programs, including Stanford and Cornell. This year, Columbia University even hosted graduation ceremonies segregated by race, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status. It is mind-blowing. We know our education system is largely controlled by left, especially the Ivy League schools. Just like Governor Gavin Newsom touts that universal mail-in voting protects election integrity and transparency, the left's being inclusive really means consistently reminding people how different they are. Inclusiveness should have been a good thing, but the left changed its definition. It's using inclusiveness to divide people. When people talk about racial segregation, the first thing that comes to mind is usually slavery before the Civil War. Segregation has long been regarded as being discriminatory and racist. Being segregated, minorities would never mingle with mainstream well and become part of the mainstream one day. But the left came and changed the narrative. It now promotes racial segregation while condemning the so-called systemic racism. Who is creating systemic racism here? Well, we'll leave the call up to you. A new study by the Texas Public Policy Foundation says the Biden administration's big government legislative agenda is expected to kill 5.3 million jobs and generate $4.5 trillion in debt. The study also suggests America's GDP will be reduced by $3.7 trillion. That's more than the cost of the Democrats' $3.5 trillion bill. One interesting part of the study is that it broke down the impact for 3 states: Arizona, West Virginia, and Texas. Among the 3, Texas would suffer the most with a $400 billion increase in debt and over 460,000 jobs lost. West Virginia would be the least impacted with a $24 billion debt increase and 29,000 job losses. Notably, the 2 key centrist Democrats, Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, are from West Virginia and Arizona respectively. So that's the estimated impact on their states from the Democratic Party's big government agenda. The study also lists the impact on families and businesses. On families, the burden of national debt increases on each American household is around $35,000. A marginal income tax penalty on small business owners could be as high as $130,000 annually. Median family income would drop by $12,000. The removal of the state and local tax deduction would mean middle-class families would receive $15, while wealthy Democrat donors in blue states would receive $150,000. On businesses, the Biden administration's legislative agenda would reduce $660 billion in investment. Tax unrealized capital gains would yield more than 40% less revenue than expected. A corporate tax hike would reduce wage growth by 23% for employees. An international tax rate hike would eliminate 12,000 full-time positions in America. And that's it for today, my friends. Check out the playlist right here for more eye-opening content. You can join me in the Eye Opener Telegram chat room and follow me on Newmaker, Gab, Parler, and Getter. Now, don't forget, please sign up to the email list so that we can stay in touch. I'd like to thank you all, and I'll see you next time.